Who is funding the carnage in eastern Congo? Facts, evidence, and what sponsoring genocide really means. There is abundant, credible evidence that armed groups in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, receive external political, military, and material support, most clearly from neighboring states, notably Rwanda, and from networks that traffic weapons and mercenaries. Independent UN, media, and NGO reports document foreign backing for some militias. However, as of the most recent public records and judicial decisions, there is no international court judgment finding France, Israel, or the United States legally guilty of sponsoring genocide in the DRC. Concrete allegations about those Western states tend to fall into two types. 1. Historic or indirect involvement, arms sales, private contractors, diplomatic positioning. And 2. Accusations of political complicity, e.g., supporting a government that in turn backs proxies. This piece lays out the evidence, explains legal thresholds for genocide, and shows where the facts stop short of proving the specific crime of state-sponsored genocide. Sources are cited throughout. 1. Why this matters, scale and stakes. Eastern DRC has repeatedly produced waves of mass killing, massive displacement, and war crimes tied to an atomized set of armed groups, foreign-backed proxies, and state forces. Recent offensives by the M23 and other groups have produced thousands of deaths, mass graves, and sweeping displacement. The human impact is indisputable and ongoing. Independent monitoring, UN, humanitarian NGOs, investigative journalism, documents civilian massacres and the collapse of protection in many areas. 2. What sponsoring genocide means, legal threshold. Under the 1948 Genocide Convention and international criminal law, genocide is a specific crime. It requires proof of intent to destroy in whole or in part a protected group, national, ethnic, racial, religious, plus acts such as killing, causing serious harm, or measures to prevent births. For a state to be legally found to have sponsored genocide, a court must establish that state organs or agents intentionally provided the means, direction, or substantial support to carry out genocide, and that the recipients committed genocidal acts with the requisite intent. Allegations, political responsibility, or arms transfers do not automatically equal legal guilt for genocide. Criminal findings require rigorous evidence and court determinations. 3. The most substantiated pattern of foreign involvement, Rwanda and regional actors. The most robust, repeatedly confirmed finding from independent investigators is not about France, Israel/USA, but about Rwanda's role in supporting certain armed groups, notably M23, in eastern DRC. Confidential and published UN group of experts reports, and international media analyses, have produced documentary, intelligence, and eyewitness material pointing to Rwandan military involvement and backing for M23 operations, including troop presence, logistics, and material support. These reports have driven diplomatic pressure, sanctions, and regional diplomacy. For evidence related to France, Israel, and the United States. What is documented France diplomatic posture and influence? France has publicly condemned some actors, for instance condemning Rwandan involvement, and engaged in regional diplomacy. News reporting shows France calling for an end to external support for M23 and urging de-escalation. These are political actions, not evidence of sponsorship of massacres. Historical complexity. France's role in the Great Lakes region has had periods of close ties to various actors. Critics sometimes allege that Western powers' policies, e.g., selective support, intelligence sharing, have indirectly enabled violence. But diplomatic support or influence differs from documented, intentional provisioning of forces to commit genocide. No court has found France criminally responsible for sponsoring genocide in the DRC. Israel arms transfers to African states. Scholarly and NGO work documents that Israeli arms manufacturers have sold weapons to various sub-Saharan states over decades. Some historical reports mention Israel among suppliers to governments in the region. That pattern shows arms diplomacy and commercial arms transfers, a matter of export controls, regulation, and accountability, not per se proof of intentional state-sponsored genocide. Amnesty, research papers, and SIPRI-type analyses document Israeli arms sales historically. No judicial finding of genocide sponsorship. There is no public legal ruling that Israel sponsored genocide in the DRC. Arms sales can be subject to scrutiny, illegal transfers and use violations, but they are not the same as a judicial finding of genocidal intent. United States aid, diplomacy, sanctions and military cooperation. The U.S. is a major humanitarian donor to the DRC and has security cooperation programs in the region. U.S. public reports, State Department country and human rights reports, document support for stabilization and humanitarian assistance while also noting abuses by local forces and armed groups. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on actors destabilizing eastern Congo and on networks linked to rebel groups, and at times has been active in mediation. Allegations versus proofs. Critics argue that U.S. geopolitical choices, for instance, support for regional governments or insufficient pressure at critical moments, have indirectly permitted violence. But again, indirect geopolitical choices are political critiques, not legal proof that the U.S. intentionally sponsored genocide in the DRC. 5. Arms, mercenaries and private networks. The real vectors. Wherever the weapons, funds or fighters flow, violence follows. Independent investigators, media outlets and UN panels repeatedly document cross-border flows of arms and ammunition, sometimes from obscure brokers and private companies in multiple countries. Use of private military contractors and mercenaries. Recent episodes in eastern Congo involved foreign mercenaries and contracted security personnel, e.g., reports of Romanian and other mercenaries being involved in operations, which complicate state responsibility chains. Regional state backing of proxies, Rwanda being the clearest documented case, which has direct operational impact on the ground. These mechanisms are frequently opaque, involving private firms, shell companies and porous borders, which is why investigators trace complex financial and military links across continents. 6. What independent institutions have concluded. UN, NGOs, press. UN group of experts reports repeatedly document foreign support to armed groups, naming actors and patterns for certain time periods, and provide detailed evidence on flows of weapons, personnel and logistics. These are authoritative investigative sources used by the Security Council. Investigative press, Le Monde, Reuters, The New Humanitarian, etc., have published exclusive access to confidential UN material and corroborating field reporting that highlights foreign military participation in eastern DRC operations. Human rights NGOs, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, document abuses by state and non-state actors and track arms transfers and complicity. Their work documents crimes, recommends sanctions and pushes for accountability, but NGOs themselves do not hand down criminal convictions. 7. Why sensational headlines claiming France, Israel/USA guilty of sponsoring genocide are not supported by current legal record. Burden of proof and intent. To call a state guilty of sponsoring genocide requires demonstration of specific genocidal intent by that state, a very high legal bar, and an appropriate judicial body, e.g. the International Criminal Court, an international tribunal or another competent court, must issue a conviction or a finding. That has not occurred for France, Israel or the United States in relation to the DRC. Political responsibility versus criminal responsibility. There is room for robust political critique, e.g., these states' policies helped create conditions in which atrocities occurred. But political responsibility and judicial guilt are different categories. The public record shows strong evidence implicating Rwanda in direct backing of the M23. And shows historical arms transfers and geopolitical choices by various external states, but not judicial findings against France, Israel/USA for genocide sponsorship. 8. Open questions and investigative leads that need more scrutiny. If one were to investigate possible state complicity beyond existing public reporting, these are the high-impact leads to pursue. Documented chain of custody for weapons used in specific massacres. Manufacturer, middleman, end user. This is how arms transfer culpability can be traced. Financial records linking state funds or covert aid to militia coffers, bank trails, shell companies. Communications and orders showing direction from state agents to proxies to commit crimes against protected groups. This would be the most direct route to establishing genocidal intent. Witness testimony from combatants and commanders describing external orders, logistics or training provided by a foreign state. Forensic analysis of attack sites and chain of command that could link atrocities to sponsors. At present, publicly available UN, NGO, and press investigations have advanced items 1 and 5 for some actors, notably regional states, but have not produced incontrovertible judicial proof that Western states named by the user are guilty of sponsoring genocide. 9. Recommendations for accountability and for readers who want to push for justice demand transparent UN-style investigations and full access for independent experts to contested areas. UN Group of Experts reports are the most authoritative investigative source. Strengthening their mandate and transparency helps. Push for forensic arms tracing and export control probes in the countries that manufacture and transfer weapons used in the conflict. Support legal pathways. Encourage national prosecutions, universal jurisdiction cases, or referrals to the ICC if evidence meets legal thresholds. Document and protect witnesses. Witness testimony is central. Ensure protections and legal aid for witnesses who can testify to state-provided support. Point 10. Bottom line, conclusion. There is clear, repeated, and credible evidence that external actors, most notably Rwanda, have materially supported armed groups in eastern DRC, and that this support has fueled atrocities with catastrophic civilian consequences. There is also documented arms trade activity involving suppliers from multiple countries and complex private networks that have supplied weapons to the region. However, the public record and international judicial record do not support the claim that France, Israel, or the United States have been legally found guilty of sponsoring genocide in the DRC. Those are extraordinarily serious juridical determinations. At present, allegations against those Western states are political and journalistic critiques or point to policy failures, not court-proven convictions for genocide. If your goal is accountability, target concrete, investigable actions, arms tracing, forensic work, judicial referrals, and support independent investigators and NGOs that do painstaking fieldwork. The difference between political accusation and criminal conviction matters. For truth, for law, and for long-term justice.